Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord, and welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Sorry for this one being a little late. I actually ended up having a lot of work to do this week on a whole lot of other projects, some of which may show up on here, but most of them are more real-life projects, so hopefully you do not mind the wait. Especially considering that half of this video has now already disappeared at the time of this upload. But maybe it'll be important information for you when it gets rerun next year. Or if the cards happen to pop up, because you never know with the second anniversary. But we've got 6 new cards to talk about. Let's go ahead and get started. Starting things off with Kogane4. Kogane4 is a strange card. When you consider what this card does, you would think that she would be a powerful enmity card. However, she actually ends up having a weaker appeal than even Kogane1 when maxed out, and Kogane4 attempts to balance this weakness through link appeal buffing. You could almost consider her for a visual center, but then there's a huge flaw. The buff comes second rather than first. It results in Kogane having a lot of potential damage on the table, but has no amazing way to finish off judges. You might see this card shine as Vocal Antika grows, or if we ever get a Vocal Visual-centric center. Otherwise, she's just okay, I guess. Her roles are Enmity and Buffer. Kogane's first skill is a Vocal Point 4 to 2.0 that scales on how low your mental is, and has a secondary attack of a Vocal 3.0. This then links into a Vocal 150% buff for 4 turns. Her max version of the skill becomes a Visual Point 4 to 2.0 that again scales on lower mental, and then has a secondary hit of a Visual 4.0. This then links into a Visual 150% buff for 4 turns. Her passives, at 1 star, she gains a Vocal Visual 25% up if your mental is 50% or lower, 20% chance to activate twice. Her 2-star passive is a 45% buff to Vocal and Visual if your mental is 75% or lower, 20% chance to activate twice. Her uncap at 3 stars is a Vocal Visual plus 100, and at 4 stars she even gains an additional Visual 100 uncap to unlock as well. And her memory appeal when maxed is a Visual 2.0 that links into a Visual 150% buff for 5 turns. For recommended supports, opt for visual buffs or vocal depending on preference. Vocal is a little weaker overall, but has more potential due to the overall lack of vocal support for Antika. So this is kind of more of a long con style of build where we're just kind of hoping for more vocal cards to show up for Antika, or at least very vocal-centric cards, so that this Kogane can then pay off as a utility vocal card. Otherwise, take advantage of Yuika's buff and just try to hit super hard once you fall below half HP. As recommended teammates go, Kogane is pretty much aiming to help vocal teams more than anything else. It's not an amazing situation to be in, but you gotta make the best of it. Keep the Mamimi and Sakuya card pairing in mind, it can matter. So Mamimi 1 and Sakuya 3 if you're going for a melancholy style build, or Mamimi 3 and Sakuya 1 if you want more utility to your build. I can't recommend her for visual teams in good faith due to Bebop Kogane existing. So there is a sample visual Antika, but I would almost rather have Bebop Kogane on that team over this Kogane. So overall, Kogane gets a B as a center. Kogane as a center is almost good, but it drops the ball by placing the large buff as the follow-up attack rather than the initial. Stick to Mamimi 4 or Sakuya 2 as your center, and let Kogane hang out where she needs to be in the leader position. As a unit, she's somewhere between a B+ and an A-. Kogane is just under the proper A range, and most of this has to do with how much utility she gets out of being the leader slot for teams that can afford to have her. If we see a vocal visual focus team, she might end up becoming a key support through her innate passives, plus higher chances to activate them as a leader. Shying away from being a support Kogane does end up making her not a shoe-in A-tier unit. Next we have Kiriko. Kiriko enters the fray with a new support SSR this banner, and ends up being put in a very interesting situation. Now, there's actually a lot of merit that we didn't explain with the event Kiriko, and how good she is for TFD. This Kiriko trades out Dance Mastery Stamina for Stamina Support, which is kind of weaker, but almost triples the amount of Dance Mastery Dance, and has an evolving appeal, as well as having some of the most aggressive Kiriko passives we've seen yet on a Kiriko support. She's definitely a big get for Dance Antika. Her skills are Idol's Bond, Dance Mastery Dance which reaches plus 16 at level 75, Promise Recovery, Rest Boost, and Rank 7 Stamina Support at level 70. And her TFD idea is Dance. So what does Kiriko do? Her 1-star passive is a dance 30% buff if you're in the dance position, has a 20% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a dance 50% up if your team includes Kiriko, 20% chance to activate once. Her uncap is a plus 100 to dance, and her 4-star appeal is a dance 3.5 that reduces your attention by 10% for 3 turns. She also has an evolving support appeal, which starts at 2.6 at level 60 and goes up to a 3.0 at level 80. Otherwise, it's a 2.5 for every level before 60. Kiriko gets an A+ to an S-. She's a really interesting card in that she can be extremely useful for true ends on top of solid building for your dance and leader position cards. Since her 2-star passive only requires Kiriko on the team, as long as she is on the stage, she's perfectly good for TFD runs, she's great for true end runs, for just casual wing runs, she's good for team building, and she's fine enough for Grade Fest, which is why she earns fairly solid marks. While I think Event Kiriko still has her place on many Antika teams, this Kiriko has a niche she can fill, and when you consider how much damage she can put on the table, it might entice you to try to pull a copy or two. And last of the first set, we have the Event Rinze. This time around, our Event SR is Rinze, and this Rinze is kinda lame. Her mastery is weak, Trouble Guard isn't particularly amazing, and her passives aren't super enticing. It's fine enough groundwork for a future Hokago card, but overall is not all that great in terms of practicality. It is nice, though, that we see a Natsuha Rinze card for once. Her skills are Idol's Bond, which reaches rank 4, Visual Mastery Visual, which reaches 5 at level 40, Promise Recovery, Rest Boost, and Trouble Guard, and her TFD idea is Visual. Rinze's first skill is a Visual 12% up if you're in the visual position, has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a Vocal Visual 17% up as well as Attention 25% up as long as it's turn 3 or earlier, 30% chance to activate once. Her uncap is a plus 50 to Visual, and her 4-star appeal is a Visual 2.0 that applies a 25% vocal buff for 3 turns. Rinze gets a C-. Thanks, but no thanks, Rinze. Her card art might be cute, and the commus could be really important to building Rinze and Natsuha's characters, but in terms of using her as a card, nah. As I mentioned, there's a good sense of groundwork for future cards with this one, but not every card can be a winner at the end of the day. And now moving into the second set, again, this banner just disappeared as of the day of this recording, so this information might not be super useful to you now, but it could be useful to you if you happen to pull on the banner and get any of the 3 cards, especially since 2 of the cards we're going to talk about are permanent. But first we have to talk about Limited Mano, otherwise known as Mano2. The second champion of Illumination Stars from not all that long ago. In the beginning, Illumination Stars only had Hiyori 1 to look at in terms of being a capable leader, and then Mano2 swooped in and stole that place from her for a long time. Since then, Mano4 has stolen the win from this card's sales. There's a lot of reasons to like this Mono, but many of those reasons now feel overshadowed by the advent of a much better Mono. If you have no options for Illumination Stars and do not plan on rolling for Mano4, then Mano2 is your next best bet. Perfectly acceptable, just the subject of power creep. Her roles are Center, Buffer, as well as Memory Boost. So, Mono's initial skill is a Vocal Dance Visual 1.5 appeal that applies a 5-turn Vocal Dance Visual 5% buff. This then links into a 10% boost of your memory gauge. At max, you earn a Vocal Dance Visual 2.0 appeal that applies a 10% buff to all 3 stats for 5 turns, and links into the same memory gauge 10% up. Her passives at 1 star unlocks a Vocal Dance Visual 21% up if the turn count is 3 or less, has a 40% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a Vocal Dance Visual 21% again, except the turn count must be 4 or later, 40% chance to activate once. Her uncap is a plus 200 to Visual, and her memory appeal, when maxed, is a Vocal Dance Visual 0.5 that applies a 2-turn Vocal Dance Visual 50% buff, then links into an extra Vocal Dance Visual 0.5 appeal. For recommended supports, build for everything you've ever had in mind for a Rainbow Center. Prioritize attention gaining early, as you want to have as many of your enmity passives activate as soon as possible around turn 4 to completely devastate judges through raw numbers. Otherwise, just find as many damaging passives as you can, and let Mono do her thing. For recommended teammates, building a team for Mano2 is very similar to Mano4, though you can make some adjustments to suit your playstyle if need be. Consider higher damage with cards like Limited Chiyuki or Amana, or standard buffing powers of Chiyoko and Rinze. So the Chiyoko Rinze build is sampled here, but you could include Chiyuki 3, a Mano2. You could even have a Mano1 or a Mano2 if you just want pure damage and no healing. There's a lot of options. It's a very flexible build. Overall, Mano gets a B+ to an A- as a center. Mano2 gets decent marks for still being a solid option for Illumination stars. If this was last year, Mano would have probably been a solid S or S+, but now there's a very clear upgrade to this card. And as a unit, B+ to A- again. Mano as a card is honestly still fine. While she does feel mostly lackluster compared to her 4th variant, she still can hold her own as a card that allows you to run rainbow teams for the sake of it. She's not the most amazing buffing unit if you plan to run her on non-Illumination Stars teams, but she can do okay things still. And next, we have probably the most important card from her banner, Tea Time Amana. For the time being, this is Amana's best vocal support and one of the better all-rounder supports for any vocal team. Any card that has 2 masteries for the same room almost always has a high amount of value, and Amana's combination being SP and Stamina is kinda ridiculous, since Vocal Mastery Stamina means you actually regain stamina for being in the vocal room. Especially when you consider how much SP you're earning from her, pairing her up with Vocal Mastery units leads to insane gains for little to no cost. In fact, you might even be healed for doing that. This card has very high value as you find more copies. Her skills are Idol's Bond, Vocal Mastery SP, which reaches +16 at level 75, Promise Recovery, Rest Boost, as well as Vocal Mastery Stamina, reaching rank 6 at level 70. And her TFD idea is Vocal. Her 1-star passive is a Vocal 21% up if you're in the Vocal position, has a 30% chance to activate once. 2-star passive is a Vocal 30% up if your mental is 90% or higher, has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 3-star is a Vocal 100 uncap, and her 4-star is a Vocal 3.0 appeal that then heals 7% of your missing mental. Her support appeal is a Visual 2.5 that applies a 10% mental heal, and then it evolves at level 80 up to a mental 20% heal, though the appeal damage stays the same. Amana overall earns an S+. Amana sits in a very comfortable position for vocal supports. Her biggest flaws, honestly, are that her support skill is visual, which does not help vocal-centric teams, and the evolving version of it doesn't really offer any crazy amount of utility. Her 4-star skill is kinda lame too. She can hang out in the guest slot and still do everything you need to have her do, and then some. She's a huge pickup for aspiring vocal teams or rainbow teams. And lastly, we have the SR Tenka. Tenka's Valentine's SR is honestly an interesting card to talk about when it comes to building teams. If you want to ignore any of the Tenka cards that emphasize damage, this Tenka firmly sits as one of the most unique approaches to her kit. The ability to keep yourself healthy while also setting up for the next turn on your dance vocal teams is surprisingly hard to come by. You won't find this Tenka too often in Grade Fest, but if you lack any particular Tenka for dance or vocal Astromeria teams, and want to set up your other damage dealers, she's a unique pick. Her roles are Buffer, Healer, as well as Attention Down. Tenka's initial skill is a dance 50% buff for 2 turns and also recovers 10% of your health, and has an attention 30% down buff on yourself for 1 turn. This then links into a dance 50% buff for 4 turns. At max, you unlock a vocal 100% buff for 2 turns, heal 10% of your health, and reduce your attention by 50% for 1 turn, and it links into a vocal 50% buff for 4 turns. At 1 star, she unlocks a dance 15% up if your mental is 75% or higher, with a 40% chance to activate once. At 2 stars, she gains an attention 30% down passive as long as it's turn 3 or later, 40% chance to activate once. Her uncap is a +100 to mental, and her memory appeal at max is a mental damage cut of 20% for 3 turns and links into a mental heal of 20%. For recommended supports, vocal dance mix supports are probably the way to go. You can choose to emphasize one over the other if you're running a mono-type team, or opt for the mix set if you want to run her on a Mano2 team, for example. Lots of similarities with some previous builds, but that's just because there's so much of a core support lineup with team building. Honestly, the Illumination support is just that good that you could probably just include them on any single team and they will do perfectly fine. As for recommended teammates, we only have one today, and that is Vostromeria. Vostromeria feels like the wave if you want to run Tenka on brand. Otherwise, you could opt to build her in a vocal dance mixed unit to run in place of a Chiyoko or Rinzai in a Mano2 team. So we have cards like Rinzai 4, or the SR Rinzai, Amana2, Chiyuki 3, this Tenka, and Chiyoko 1. While I would mention Danstromeria, the problem is that Tenka 2 is such an integral part of that team that this Tenka serves no purpose on Danstromeria. even if you have the other two necessary pieces. Overall, Tenka gets a D as a center. Just please don't. Do not. Avoid it at all costs. As a unit, she gets a C+ to a B-. She earns the grade by being more of a niche pick for teams. That doesn't necessarily mean she's bad, but you will be hard-pressed to use her over other Tenka cards unless you have a clear goal in mind with a pure buffing unit on your team. And that's the end of the video. Thank you so much as always for watching. If there's anything you'd like to hear from us, please let us know in the comments and we'll see if we can scrounge together a video for you. Otherwise, we'll be focusing on whatever banner comes next. And we'll make sure to bring that information to you. So, till next time, I've been Cho. Thanks for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.